out there. I'll go straight to putting it then. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you for your presentation. We're a little behind schedule, folks, so we will call up Auckland Transport. Apologies for the delay to the various AT members here today. Dean Kimpton, and we also have a number of other staff available for questions on temporary traffic management. Welcome, Dean, and over to you.
I think it's still morning, so morena everybody. Good to be here again. I'm just mindful of time, Chair, so I've got a few comments I want to make at the front end, but I think the substance is in the topical updates, so we'll aim for those. I'll move quickly through the balance. And if those that are here, and I do have some staff to assist with more full understanding, they can come forward in the sequence that we are doing things. And maybe on that note, the first one is, I was going to do the ferry program, and then Mark Lambert, you're doing the time of use one. Okay. You'll see that what we're going to cover off. I'll just spin across the top on some of the recent highlights. And actually, I've added one in that's not on the slide there. Statement of intent. I know this was the subject of good discussion when we presented the quarterly business update. But the statement of intent and our performance against those measurables, we are now meeting or exceeding 16 of our targets. There's only 2 that we're not. If I can just highlight, of those that were met, there was a lot of discussion, particularly around our procurement spend for Māori business. We're now ahead of the target. We're sitting at 2.11% compared to our target of 2%. And I indicated that I wanted to get to the bottom of how we measured it. And in all these things, are swings and roundabouts, but we are ahead. So I'm very pleased to be able to say that, hence the emphasis. On the other 2 that we have not quite achieved against, our timetabling for public transport services is 86% versus 87%. There has been challenges with timetables. That was at the end of February. Part of the challenge was with the train service. And our capital spend is at 87% versus 90%. So with all those, we're very close, and our target is to meet or exceed all of our objectives. You'll see those bullet points there. We saw more people move through our corridors, even though congestion was slightly up over the month of February. The Western Express is, I was going to say going like a rocket. That's probably not quite the right expression, but it's going like a full bus, and there's good patronage there, so we're very pleased with that. There has been a lot of events across Auckland, and we have supported all of those. There was some media which I quite frankly was a bit annoyed about concerning Pink. But the fact is that we met all of our KPI commitments in regards to people waiting and then leaving that location over the Pink concert. And just to dwell on it very briefly, the wait time before somebody get off the site was varied between 10 minutes and 45 minutes on the Saturday, and between 10 minutes and 50 minutes on the Friday, and then on the Saturday it was between 10 and 50, and the precinct was cleared within an hour and 15 to an hour and 30. Those were longer times than what we normally plan for, but the bus hub on Eden Park site itself was not available to us, and there was only 1 platform at the train station. So I think the team did very well, and I want to highlight that. Recent challenges, there's a lot of work going on the capital program. You've had a long discussion around the integrated transport plan, but when you take a change in regional fuel tax, you've got a government policy statement that's shifted the funding settings, and we're coming into an RLTP, and there's a lot of other acronyms I can throw at this. The team is working very hard to get rationale into what we're investing on and the why, and respecting what we've committed to. In terms of strategic issues and opportunities, to be fair, I think I should just take this as read. We're working well on the integrated transport plan. I support the discussion that we had. Reiterate, it came from certain quarters. We have to lift our line of sight. This is 30 to 50 years. There's the 10-year RLTP is focused on what we need to do to improve our current network, but where we put the big interventions across Auckland to deliver outcomes for Aucklanders and in turn the New Zealand economy is for me one of the key purposes of that integrated Auckland transport plan. You'll see that we're working on group shared services. This is about efficiency, reducing the burden on taxpayers. Fair share, you'll be aware of this. This is effectively a business-to-business relationship. This is Auckland Transport working with big employers where they are choosing to subsidise public transport, encourage their staff to use it as a way of moving backwards and forwards into the workplace. The benefit to them is they demonstrate reduced carbon footprint, and they also reduce their cost because they don't have to provide as many car parks. And we will touch on time of use and technology options when we go to that. Time of use charging update. Just some topical updates. I know there's always been a lot of interest in the ferry program and its electrification. You'll see there we've got 2 of those passenger ferries currently being built and supported significantly by ECA funding, and they are due over the next 12 to 24 months. We're working very hard to get charging infrastructure in place, and installation of the first charger is due out at Half Moon Bay later this year, with further work being done on what will be required at the downtown ferry terminal, Hobsonville Point. And you'll see the launch dates for those new ferries. So that will be a pretty exciting time, and it's certainly leading technology. On that note, rather than I'm happy to stop for questions on what I've said, Chair, and then go into the other topical updates. What would you suit? What would you prefer?
I think Dean will just go through and do it, and then just open it up.
So maybe Mark, if you can join us, and Mark Lambert that is, on time of use, and then we've got Chris Martin on dynamic lanes, and then Tracy Burkhan and Mark Banfield on TTM. But come up one at a time, that'll be great. Mark, time of use.
Cool, thank you, Dean. Good morning, Chair, Mayor, Councillors. A quick update on time of use. We've held our first political reference group, which was a good meeting. We received good feedback. Thank you to those members of that. As a result of that, we're just finalising our work plan for the first 2 stages of that programme. First stage is to get us ready for public consultation, noting the feedback that we have received, and we are seeking legal advice on what level of public consultation we will need to go through. But on the assumption we will need to do that, aiming for the first stage to get ready for that by around October this year. In parallel, looking at stage 2, which will be to take us through to procurement of a scheme, depending on what that scheme is, in accordance with policy, by early next year, and certainly to the target to be ready to procure when the legislation is eventually enabled, the legislation being the critical path. So we are engaging with the Ministry of Transport on that timing, and seeking to, through the Mayor's office, get copies of legislation as well, so we can really get into that and provide our Auckland view. In parallel to those 2 stages, which is getting ready for a public consultation and to procure the scheme following legislation enactment, looking to progress extensive stakeholder and public engagement to start setting the scene to build social licence. And we're also looking at, again, following feedback from the political reference group, how can we try and get some physical progress on the ground during that time to actually show what we're talking about, to enable that engagement with the public, and to look at different options as well. We're just confirming through existing AT funding OPEX availability for the next 6 to 9 months. And we've set up the framework for a number of work streams which will need to work in parallel over the next 6 to 12 months. We've identified team leaders, we've identified a number of staff and resources around that, and work has commenced on some of those key work streams. Those being policy and strategy, building on existing policy through the congestion question which the Ministry of Transport developed. On the basis of that will allow us to accelerate the confirmation of the ultimate option that we are seeking to put in, rather than reinvent the wheel. That needs to be refined to represent all options that we are currently talking about, including motorway charging and access to the motorway, which is not explicitly referenced in that piece of policy work, so we do need to update that and bring that option into the mix. We've set up our legal and commercial work stream, which is preparing for engagement with the Ministry on the future legislation. And as I've mentioned, the comms and engagement, how can we engage with both stakeholders and the public to start building that consensus as the legislation and the options are progressed. Next key milestone will be to come back through our board and the political reference group and to this meeting to confirm the long list of options and how we're going to progress quickly to a short list and a recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Chris Martin, can you come forward and give us an update on dynamic lanes and streets? Thank you. How about if I click you through with that? And
Morning, Chair. Chris Martin. On dynamic streets, we've been looking at, we looked at the beginning about 180 different main corridors around Auckland. We picked a few. The first one to go, the next one to go will be Maora Street, where we've finished consultation, been supported with the local board, and now we're going to the detailed design to finalise that by the end of this financial year, which is June, and then we'll go into procurement in early next, from July onwards with the gantries and get that going. We also looked at Great North Road. That one we want to do after. It's going to go into detailed design while we are delivering the Maora Street one. So I think Auckland's very used to dynamic lanes, but they're becoming a bit more complicated. We're also now looking at dynamic timing. So can we use the same piece of road at different times of day for different uses? And there we're trialling Main Highway, where it'll go in phases. The first phases, which will go live next month, is do people recognise the signs? And then after that, it's operating from 7 to 10. After that, we'll start, depending on congestion, algorithms will then change the signage of the use of the road. Is it a bus lane for later, or do we bring it back earlier in the future? That will have, I think, implications for all of Auckland. If you look at Onawa Road, that's an example where we can change the time of day from a T2, T3 as it gets more congested to bus lane and then back down. So we think there'll be a lot of gains from that. We're also then looking in the future. Park Road is an area that we're looking at investigating dynamics roads right now. Dairy Flat Highway and Ellerslie Panmure Highway as well. Those two will be for general vehicles, Park Road potentially for bus dynamic lane. We're also doing a whole lot of studies. We've looked at Dominion Road and all those other corridors. We've looked at them from a dynamic lane point of view, and at the moment we don't think it's a solution, but we're looking at dynamic timings and we're looking at those corridors. Is any improvement we can do from our technology that we put onto the SCATs to improve the management system of the signals to clearways, etc. And we're looking at it at an hourly breakdown, so we can see if we can get little efficiencies there, and we'll update you when we progress with that.
okay, sorry. Thanks. And if I can invite Tracy and Mike Banfield forward, and we'll give you an update on temporary traffic management. Thank you. I am in your
do the first two. Good morning. Just a little update on the temporary traffic management improvement program. You will have all received last night from my office an elected members update on the TTM program, which has got a lot more detail than the presentation today. So happy to take questions from those of you that have had a chance to look at it today, but also fire through any other offline questions. Happy to take those for each of the areas you're interested in. But our Spotlight initiative this meeting is our live monitoring of active temporary traffic management sites. We launched that during the wonderful time of March Madness and actually had initially daily stand-ups and then 3 days a week stand-ups, identifying actually live sites on the network that were causing congestion at any given time. We monitored closely 50 arterials and any known work sites that were likely to cause us congestion, often highlighted by members of your communities to us. That was really successful. We're now looking at how we have a sustainable way to keep that live eyes on the network going forward, with a focus on getting ahead of the congestion curve as opposed to waiting until it turns to custard before we do something. Our new initiatives as we roll forward into the next couple of months turn a little bit inward. We're looking at how we assess contractors coming to us with risk-based site-specific applications, so that departure from our code of practice, more in line with the New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. How is AT going to deal with those? How, as the Road Controlling Authority, do we discharge our responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act, but also to the communities that we serve in assessing whether those contractors have put in a risk-based application that we can support or not, and what does that look like when we go out and audit those, because we don't have the rule book anymore, so it's a little bit dynamic. So looking at how we support AT staff and our contractors and developers when they bring us those applications. That's both those points there. And currently we're running a number of workshops internally to let our people know what NZG TTM means to them, and supporting the whole of the industry move towards these new approaches. I think Mark's going to talk further to that, investigating the further options to reduce the cost of TTM. I think we've got one more slide. These are just the finished initiatives that we brought you in previous updates. But interesting to report that the amendments to the corridor access fee schedule have not resulted in a vast amount more revenue for Auckland Transport. What it's done is actually seen a change in behaviour from the applicants. When they get their fee quote for particularly occupying parts of the corridor, they've said, hang on a second, we don't need that much space if it's going to cost that much. And so that's a success for us. It would be lovely to have additional revenue, but actually we want smaller footprints for less time on the network rather than the moolah. So that's been an interesting exercise so far, although that only came into play in October 2023, and we had a few of the legacy applications rolling through. So it will be very interesting to see the March result, which is imminent, to see whether the activity over the autumn increases the revenue as well as better compliance in that space. That's all I really have there. Thank you.
Thanks. Mark.
Yeah, good morning. So taking on from where Tracy left off, just a bit of a snapshot, if you will, of the current scenario and focus areas for us in terms of trying to reduce traffic management cost. Some key points that I want to cover off are that we're bundling work across our delivery portfolio where possible. Some examples of this recently include Great North Road, Point Chev, Miola Road. In these sites where we're combining active mode, public transport upgrades and much needed road renewals. It's important to note that across our larger programs of work, we're broadly achieving our targets of around 10% and actually coming in under in many respects. Some examples of these include Great North Road, stage 1, slightly over at 12%, Point Chev, Miola, coming in at about 6.9%, and Eastern Busway, a larger program where you can see the economy of scale and the efficiencies that you get in these types of examples at 4.6%. Where a real challenge for us is in the cost side of things for traffic management is around the smaller bespoke sort of one-off projects. On these projects, typically ranging from 20 to 30% in extreme examples, sometimes more. And this is really where we're trying to focus our efforts at the moment. Putting in some key controls in the field in terms of how we deliver these, stopping these, reviewing these projects, trying to drive them by way of example. Our speed management program, we're seeing reductions in cost from 17% down to about 11% on average. Yeah, next slide. So some examples of what we've done in the field. Here's a recent example of a precast raised pedestrian crossing in Kumia, adjacent to Main Road. This was actually done in one night shift. Traffic management cost, minimal, small percentile, one night, very little disruption. Another example, Ponsonby Pompalia example here. What we did here, this would have previously been an arduous, painful experience for the local community at 60 days if you'd taken a traditional approach. What we've done here is we've shortened that down to 2 super weekends where we've done that over early in the new year, where lots of engagement with local community, local board, finding acceptable times to minimise the impacts of this type of activity. Pleasing to see that we've got the traffic management costs down there. Previously would have been 31%, down to sub 10%. And importantly, overall project cost with the efficiency gains of doing such things down by 19%. Next, please, Dean. Yeah. Here's an example of Mangere Bridge gate trial. This is using, Tracy referred to NZG TTM, or Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. This is allowing us to risk assess more on a case-by-case basis using common sense approach rather than a broad brush thou shalt approach with the likes of Coptum. What we're looking to do here is actually a 24-hour priority giveaway for 3 days to do this project. If you just click to the next slide, please, Dean, you'll see the layout here. What you have here essentially is what you might see on some of our sort of more regional roads where you have a priority giveaway over, let's say, a local bridge, one-way bridge, for example. Traditionally, this would require a stop-go under Coptum type arrangements where you'd have 2 personnel sitting on stop-go panels. It's the cost of those personnel and the disruption thereof. What we have here is essentially an unmanned arrangement where it's safe and applicable to do so. You can set this up and actually have that work site available for the construction activities to occur without needing that ongoing, staff labour cost. So again, this brings the cost dramatically down, particularly on the smaller sites where there's a small value associated with the work per se, but what that means is the traffic management cost is obviously untenably high. When you look at it in percentages, it starts getting out of hand at 20, 30, 40%, which none of us like. So this year, we're yet to do this. It's planned, I think, in April to occur. So we're looking forward to seeing what we can try and get that down to as an outcome. Next, please. More use of closure periods where we can do that. Here's an example from our school Safe Speeds program, where we plan to close again with lots of community consultation, engagement, support from local residents, local board to do such things. Under a legacy approach, we'd be causing a lot more disruption. Traffic management costs would be higher, typically on something like this, 17%, I would say, and it wouldn't take much for that to creep over that and head into the 20s with a few rainy days thrown in between. With this revised approach, we can do this with, in a quicker time frame and bring that traffic management cost right down. Sorry, back there, Dan. Yeah. Hey, so here's a good example of these are not just one-offs. We're taking a thorough approach in the business. We're really, capturing these things through our systems and control process that we're following in the business. Here's some examples where pre-review, legacy Coptum approach, what the traffic management costs might have looked like. and post our review what we expect that traffic management to look like, with an average sitting around the 17% coming down towards that 11%. An important part of this is actually not just looking at those numbers, but it's the contractual arrangements that we're driving in Auckland Transport in terms of how we deliver work. Previously, panel contracts have had traffic management very much on a time and expense basis of how we incur that cost. So completely the wrong incentive, essentially. If you're a traffic management business, you would very much enjoy the duration of the traffic management on the project to go up rather than down. By changing that now to fixing those commercial arrangements to lump sum fixed price contracts, essentially transferring that risk of performance of those costs back to the contractor, they are therefore incentivised to shorten the duration rather than lengthen the duration. Here's a wee example of some of our collaboration with Vector in relation to some of our crossing sites that were sitting for far too long without power connection and comms connection, and just a wee example of collaboration with Vector, which one of the great outcomes here is that we've actually managed to get an online portal prioritisation into Vector, which allows us to prioritise all future power connections with Vector in a more systemised approach. So next steps, where we're heading, we've got to continue a tenacious approach, and I say it's that. We've got a lot of sites, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Capturing all of these things is not easy, so it requires the teams involved to not give up on the fight, so to speak, and to sort of try and embed and drive that change rather than just make it a one-shot wonder, so to speak. We need to bed it in. Another key work on at the moment is to actually understand the whole capital program. What does it look like across the whole program? So we've seen and cited some examples there, some good examples on the bigger stuff, sub 10%. We're getting good economy of scale and efficiency. But in the smaller stuff, you lose that efficiency. So what does that look like across our portfolio? And we'd aim to have that in due course and then track and trace that. So another important part of this is we're very much catching the downstream effect of our projects out the back end, so to speak, when they're ready for construction. Some of these are long-term duration projects. They go from the multi-year programs, projects, etc. So we're working our way upstream more to make sure that we're capturing good outcomes early in the piece when these projects, programs are consented, designed, that we've got this frame of mind in place so that we're not ending up with a retrospective approach to how we do it. Thanks very much.
Very good. So, sorry, apologies. Happy to take any questions. We've had quite a full overview, and the team will come up as required. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dean. With that, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Auckland Transport. That was very, very interesting. Look, I've got 3 questions on 3 different subjects. My first one is just going back to your comments around pink. I never drive to Eden Park. I always use public transport, and train is my public transport choice just for convenience where I live. I've got a question though, and I didn't have any trouble. I didn't seem to wait for ages. I don't know why, but it just sort of worked for me. But can I just ask, one of the things I did notice, do you have a wait problem on the Kingsland station? Because I did notice that your people were holding people actually getting up onto the station. Do you have a sort of is there a wait problem, or do you have a look at how many people are standing on the station? Is that an issue, or?
You're talking about a wait time, not or actual physical load.
WEIGHT, yeah.
I'm not specifically aware, but except to say I would have thought if I'm trying. I'm not sure if there's somebody behind me that can better answer.
That was one of the causes for timing, because they seem to hold people back.
Yeah, there'll be an issue if you're overcrowding the train platform. I think it's got to do with safety at the platform. You're better off holding them in the street than having them on the bridge and up the ramp and on the platform itself. So I suspect it's that. Yep. And we only had one platform operating. That was that compounded people management. 30,000 people though moved in an hour.
as I said, I didn't personally have an issue myself. My next question then is around changing it to ferries. And can you confirm that the next cruise season will not see the same issues with cancellations of ferries, particularly in peak times, especially in morning?
There's a lot of work going on with Roger Gray, myself and Stacey Vanderputten and Andrew Hayton, the Harbour Master, and we've got a game plan in place for how we want to manage cruise and the conflict between ferry services. The specifics of it, I don't have at hand, but I'm happy to come back and confirm what that is.
Could we just look at that next month, please, Chair? Because if it's come to me, let alone you guys, who use ferries more than in my ward, but if it's come to me and it has with multiple things, I just think we need to put something out about what we're doing about it. That'd be useful.
So happy to add that to the agenda. We can give a brief update through the CE report and it'll just confirm what we've agreed.
Thank you. And my final question is on traffic management costs. I think you're doing a great job there. But just can you confirm that we're doing something to help the little community events like Anzac Days, etc., around the ongoing costs of traffic management when it's the same event in the same place at the same time, and yet every time they seem to pay a fortune for that? Are we looking at that?
Absolutely. We've got a special events team that assist with planning those traffic management applications for those communities. And they also were extending to them, we're putting all of our people through the training to look at those with particular site-specific risk-based approach, as opposed to the old rule book where you had to have 100 cones and not allow marshals on certain corners that weren't STMS trained. So that's definitely part of the purview. The other thing we're doing is we're actually making the system easier to operate, where we've now got a light touch network application, which in the past those people had to fill out the same number of questions as if you were digging up Fanshawe Street, and so we're actually making it easier to apply, but we will need a lot more hands-on approach for those small community events where they'll have to work in conjunction with an AT events team member to look at the risks associated with their event, but they will be given the same opportunities to have a pragmatic approach to their temporary traffic management, particularly if we're working on streets that are not high volume or high traffic streets.
Thank you. Just to follow up if I can on that one. So will it be cheaper for communities who put on sort of the likes of Anzac Day? Will it be cheaper? Because the other concern that has come through is not only the amount of cones, but obviously that associated cost. So what I'm trying to find out is if you have a little Anzac, well, it's not so little, but if you have an Anzac Day, for example, in St Heliers, it's the same place, same location, all the time. You know, how do we make it more cost effective for the communities that are putting on those events?
So part of the cost is actually the number of devices that you deploy to the system. So you would imagine if you had a streamlined approach to that, the cost would come down. It's hard to answer that question in a broad brush way, because when you go site specific, you then understand that some will be much cheaper depending on where they are and what the people are proposing, and some may be the same price as they are now. So the team will be working with those event organisers though to come up with that sweet spot, that win-win, where you can be more pragmatic but also hopefully lower costs. It remains to be seen whether everything will be cheaper, and I don't think that that's achievable, because, as you say, sort of the farmers' parade still has to go down Queen Street. The Santa parade still has to go down Queen Street. So there will be constraints at the amount that we can save.
Thank you, Chair, because, you know, when you're running the same event year after year, still have to fill out the same form, whereas you think, can't we just get a 3-year approval and you know, cut the cost down and just say it's going to be X and know what it is? So I really appreciate your work you're doing in that space. Thank you.
We continue to work through that with people.
Councillor Leone.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation, and I've got about 3 questions too. The first one that I just wanted to ask is the work that you're doing to get our cars off the roads, and I know that I've just seen recently there's a partnership that's happened with KFC and the Blues to promote the free transport to that game. Are we looking at any other alternatives to help get more cars off roads and use public transport?
Our objective is to reduce congestion on the roads, and so that those that need to use the cars can, and freight can move, et cetera, et cetera. And a really important part of that is the move to public transport, walking and cycling. So I would say a lot of what we do is aligned with that objective. All of our promotion for public transport, the council's commitment to subsidising public transport, its commitment to walking and cycling aligns with that. With the KFC promotion, but it's not the only one, that's just to make it interesting and different and attract people so they actually get to use it once, if not more times, and just break down the barriers to doing this. Our open loop or using digital payment cards will be an important part of that. We expect to see with digital payments 2, 3, 5% increase in patronage just because we've made it easier to get on the bus, train or ferry. So look, a lot of what we do is aligned with exactly what you've described. And the KFC promotion is just one really small part of it.
Just to follow on from that one, like an example that I'm thinking of is if we know that we've got high, like people driving from West Auckland to South Auckland, and we're looking at the time frame that it takes versus public transport, have we done any comparison work on that and how we can highlight that through comms to say that it would be a similar time on public transport, for example?
Look, in general terms, yes, and what part of our business case, and I'll take Eastern Busway as a working example, although it's not the West Auckland to South Auckland example, but we did it on the Western Express as well. Part of the promotion is telling people how much time they will save by being in the bus over sitting in their car. I find it extraordinary. I catch the bus down Noniwa Road every morning, and I get down that road, and I'm into work in 10 minutes. That's top of Oniwa to Viaduct in 10 minutes. There'll be no change out of 30 minutes for sitting in the same car, for a car on the same road at the same time. So that is a constant part of how we're trying to promote or help people understand they can make choices where that best suits them. Pardon me, I didn't...
So that's why the North Shore has the best bus transport.
Might be good to get...
Maybe I shouldn't have given that example. I think that example applies in many, many places. And where we've got constraints, and I know that we've got, on the Western Express, we've got constraints where we go between Laker Road and the State Highway, and we're working very hard with the NZTA to remove those constraints because we know what the value add is to people's lives if they can get in and out more quickly in mass rapid transit.
Thank you. It's probably just about maybe doing an offline session with you around the comms, how that's going.
Welcome there.
Yeah, and just a couple more. So just around the how we're tracking with emissions. I know this was brought up in the previous presentation, but how are we going there with what we're on, what we're hoping to achieve?
Oh, well, I can't answer that question off the top of my head. I can answer it generically for now, but I can't answer the specifics because I just don't have it. But Auckland Transport, along with Auckland Council, remains committed to decarbonising our transport system. And so electrification of the ferries, electrification of the buses, encouraging people onto those electrified forms of public transport are inherently a part of that emission reduction commitment. I do think it's time for us to look at our emissions reduction plan in terms of to what extent or what pace can we deliver against that, because the funding has changed. That's the real answer. But the direction that we are going has not changed.
Okay, and just a final last one, just around the heated tracks. Are we on track to sort that out for this summer?
Sorry, I missed that.
I know it's Kiwi Rail, but we're working in partnership, aren't we, regarding the heated tracks? Yeah.
Sorry, heat-related impacts on the rail system. I missed what you said. Kiwi Rail has made good progress on that. We're really pleased with what they've done. Will it be an issue next season? Could well be, but I expect it to be significantly less.
Thank you.
Councillor Leone. Councillor Walker.
Just got a question on the ferries, particularly the 200 passenger battery electric ferries. Is it possible to have some information just around how the budget, the costs are panning out for those ferries, and whether there are any changes to the design?
Yes, you're talking about the procurement of the current round of procurement for, we've got a mix of electric and diesel refurb ferries.
I'm talking about your ferry program, specifically quote, 200 passenger battery electric ferries are being designed and built in Auckland. Yeah.
So we can give you an update, EV Marine's doing those, we can give you an update on how the specific new ferry program is going. Yep.
And then the other question I've got just for Mark Lambert, and it goes to time of use charging. Has there been any modelling done around time of use charging as it goes to the congestion in the network? Because my observation this morning, for example, I came in around 6 o'clock, is you've got congestion continuously, over quite a span. And is time of use charging just going to make the shoulders even worse?
Did you get the question?
I think so. I think the short answer is yes, there
Question
will.
around modelling.
Yeah.
Have we got some?
We've got some from previous policy work, which I referenced earlier, and that policy work will not be completely revisited, but we'll look at the assumptions and everything that was done at the time to do that as quickly as possible, but also look at current congestion on the network to make sure that the options that we put forward and the solutions try and address those as best they can.
It would be helpful to have some information if you've got some. I'd like that. Thank you.
Councillor Sayers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question's around the dynamic laning, and I'm a very big fan, just by way of quick feedback, very big fan of dynamic laning. I see it operating extremely well on that Whangaparo Peninsula, and I'm very kind of excited to see that there's a road within the Rodney Ward that's been identified as potential there. But my question goes around, how could we approach Waka Kotahi or NZTA about dynamic laning? And I'm specifically thinking about where those special housing area went in at Kimu, and there's very bad congestion between Kimu and Brigham's Creek out there on State Highway 16. And, the local board, the community, myself, always have kind of trying to find an avenue to lobby NZTA to look at the potential of dynamic laning on that stretch of road. So is there any way you could help there or assist in that, potentially having that looked at?
Yes. Through the Chair, yes, this program that I deliver is a joint program with NZTA, and we will bring that up through our program and investigate.
Thanks for that response. Much appreciated. Councillor Turner?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just going back to the road traffic control, really good to hear that progress is being made on this. And it kind of partly on the back of the Deputy Mayor. Is it correct, am I correct that the temporary traffic management rules were changed by the government to a completely new and much less stringent regime?
Musical chairs, sorry. Do you want me to take that one?
You go first.
So, yes, you are correct in a way. New Zealand Transport Agency Waka Kotahi used to be the keeper of the Code of Practice for Temporary Traffic Management, and it was a best practice national system, not compulsory, but actually it's fair to say over the last 20 years the whole of the country has used that as their guide to temporary traffic management. About 18 months ago now, Waka Kotahi signalled that they were no longer supporting the prescriptive guide and would not be also providing a national credentials program for temporary traffic management staff. And so they have now promulgated a new guide which is more principles based, which we call the New Zealand Guide to Temporary Traffic Management. and they've rolled it out with their contractors whereby they are taking a site-specific risk-based approach to each of their major contracts in practice, and the contractor is the one that bears the risk of putting in appropriate temporary traffic management for their sites. That has now meant that the whole rest of the country and all of the other road controlling organisations have to also adapt to no longer having a national framework.
Okay, thank you. And Auckland Transport is the consent provider for all traffic control activities in Auckland. Is that correct?
For the non-motorway roads, so there are 3 road controlling authorities in Auckland. The airport have their own roads and they're their own road controlling authority. AT for non-motorways, and New Zealand Transport Agency for the motorway network that runs through Auckland.
And does Auckland Transport see that consenting process as a positive to budget income generator?
It is, yes. Under the legislation, the Local Government Act, we are only allowed to recover costs. It would be, so we're not able to be a profit centre, but we do recover all of our costs for that activity.
So I suppose my comment is please don't let a conflict of interest affect there. Let's make sure that the savings attempts that you apply to your own projects goes right across the board to treescape, to even those individual householders who are trying to concrete the approach apron to their driveway and now find that the concreting is less than the traffic control. I really commend on what you're doing, but just please spread it right across the board. Thank you.
We'll take that as a comment. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. One question on dynamic lanes and a couple on time of use charging. So maybe we'll do dynamic first, yeah? All right, thank you. Yeah, look, it's a real basic question, but I think it's an important one. How were the streets selected for dynamic lanes? What's the criteria?
Through the chair, there's a few criteria. One, there's got to be a peak flow of congestion in one direction. If it's both directions, there's got to be road space to add another lane. So sometimes it's the flush median where we've taken that. Then there's got to be, at the end point, there's got to be no constriction. There's no use rushing people to pinch point again. Then the benefit's gone. So those are some of the things. Then you have to put gantries. So you have to look at the surrounding area. And we're doing in more and more urbanised areas, which is becoming obviously communities that live there. Object strongly, but everybody passing through very happy.
Well, it looks like very promising work, thank you. That was all, but I've got 2 more on time of use charging, so just swap musical chairs if that's all right. Thank you. So obviously a key issue in time of use charging is equity. What options have we looked at this stage for making the scheme equitable?
Well, to be fair, we haven't started that work yet. We're setting up the team, and that will be part of the work which we will bring back. Yeah, it's a little bit too early for that, but it will be part of the work.
Okay, well, I won't speak, but I'll throw something else in, which was going to be a question. But looking at a situation where funds raised through the communities that are actually paying the time of use charging, and that's invested right back into the public transport, that's probably, I would say, a good thing to investigate. And I don't know if we're at that stage yet, but if we are, that'd be great.
That is built into the plan, and certainly one of the lessons learned from overseas is that you need to be clear on what the objective of the scheme is. It's about congestion, it's not about necessarily revenue generation, but of course it will generate revenue, and therefore you need to be clear when you design the scheme what that revenue will be used for and where it will be allocated, which gets it across the line better with your public and your community engagement.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Member Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dean, just want to congratulate you, your team and AT on surpassing recent procurement targets for Māori. I know our team have had AT in the crucible over procurement targets, and in an effort to keep that positive pressure on, are there any other Māori outcomes that have been met recently that you may like to comment on?
Look, I became aware of that question just shortly before I came on. I forwarded that question on to Lillian Tahuri, and we'll come back to you with feedback. I didn't think I'd do justice by answering off the cuff. I'd like to give a proper answer, so we'll come back to you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Brown. We have a few other questions. We'd like, in order to accommodate our other presenters today, we'd like to finish this round about 12:30 if possible, folks. So we have a number of questions left, and if you could bear that in mind, that would be very helpful. Councillors Bartley, Darby, Fletcher and Ferry. Councillor Bartley.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Auckland Transport. First, I wanted to acknowledge what you're doing regarding the pedestrian crossing and the rainbow community with the rainbow buses that are out there. Really appreciate that acknowledgement and celebration of our diverse communities. I wanted to ask a question about the traffic management in regards to the communication of when works are happening on a road. That's so important for the public to be notified well in advance when within the system, Auckland Transport knows that something's going to happen on that road, but it takes a long time for people to know it, and usually they're stuck in traffic because the road's closed and they don't even know what's happening there or why, and then we risk losing social license for projects that we need to have done. So that's my question, because I'm still getting very angry people when, especially around the Glen Innes roadworks that are happening there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. I'm just going to give a very quick overview and then hand to Mark about how we handle specific projects. But what we, and I'm sure that everybody here is aware of it, but there are some 2,000 sites across Auckland that have got temporary traffic management measures in place at any one time. Not all of them are Auckland Transports. Others are allowed to be there as of right. So we can't necessarily communicate for all of them all of the time, okay? But for ours, we accept responsibility for the need to communicate with communities that are affected. So I thought maybe if I just hand over to Mark to give a more specific response, where is our work that we are doing.
Thanks, Dean. Look, in relation to our work, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. We have a very broad program. We have projects that are related to road renewals and maintenance where we might be disrupting the location for one shift or two shifts. Conversely, we have larger, more complex projects where we're there for a long time. And so the notification periods thereof very much depend on the nature and extent of what end of the spectrum you're at. Noting that any work that we do, we do plan to notify. For example, a basic site with short duration would typically be handled by our contractor partners or suppliers in terms of how they would hand out works notification letters, I believe, circa 3 days in advance. That would be for something which is of short duration, something that doesn't cause a major rift in somebody's life. Conversely, something that's more longer term enduring, some of our larger capital programs have extensive comms engagement strategies around them, and how we do that could be, prior advance and warning months in advance at a minimum, with careful consultation, door knocking, face-to-face, really bespoke approaches, depending on how, what experience our customers will get out of these scenarios.
Councillor Dean here again. Look, if you've got a specific example that's worrying you, just feel free to email it to me.
Will do. Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Councillor Henderson asked my question about time of use charging, and I'll make comments later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, and may I commend the CEO, Auckland Transport, on his presentation today. I like the strategic overview, but now I'm going to be unashamedly parochial. For 30 years, Artisan Eden, which hosted artists such as the late Don Binney, People like Peter Siddell operated very effectively out of the Essex Reserve. And it's an event that doesn't just fund, the artist scholarships. It supports the Karikari residency, chamber music festival, where they don't have to come to council and ask for money. But for the last couple of years, it has not been able to be held in the Essex Reserve because of the 5,000 fee for a few cones in and around that area. And the event, after 35 years, has lost its mojo and didn't raise as much money this year. So I just draw it to your attention to say, I know I'm being parochial, but that is one where the traffic management plan was such an overkill that it's just about, it hasn't destroyed it yet, but it has just about destroyed a very fine event.
Look, I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't aware of the issue, but can I invite you to catch up with me afterwards? Let's understand it. And
I always look forward to catching up with you, and I apologise for being parochial, but I did undertake to the artists, one of whom came to see me, George Belogi, came over Easter and said, look, this is ridiculous.
So,
I've come all the way to participate. I'm giving my time for young artists, and this is just council gone mad.
Yeah, so look, I invite people, rather than having to raise it in this forum, just pick up the phone and ask me. I'll answer it. We'll go back and have a look and see how we resolve it. I prefer to deal with these in real time rather than wait for a month to come into here to raise the subject. So that offer is always there, and I think other councillors would be aware that I always try and answer as quickly as I can.
Okay, that's good to hear, Dean, and I think there'll probably be a couple take you up on that after the meeting. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks very much. I've got a couple of questions that I'll send to email, mindful of time. The dynamic lanes stuff, but actually I've got a traffic management one, so I'll do that first because you're there. You said something before, Dean, about how some of the people operating in the road corridor have a right to be there. I'm assuming you mean like utility providers. So, and I've recently had an issue with one. Where they have a right to work in the road corridor, do they still have to do a corridor access request?
Most of the time, yes. So they have to talk to us about when and how, as opposed to the fact that they're allowed to be there. But a number of projects for specifically water care, but some of the electricity and telecommunications sectors as well, are done under what we call global approvals. So there's cyclical maintenance, so they don't require a specific corridor access request. And we're actually looking at the globals in this program to look at how we might better manage those, because we actually don't know when they're deploying those works on the network. They only have to notify us retrospectively. So where, and it sort of speaks to Councillor Bartley's point before, sometimes AT isn't aware of the work that's happening in your particular neighbourhood if it's done under either emergency or a global approval. So we are, rest assured, we're looking at the efficiency of those as well. It's a quite a large tentacled beast to get to grips with.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. So when we're talking about the corridor access requests, I just want to be clear. My understanding is we're talking about boundary to boundary. We're including the footpath, right? We're not just talking about the drive lanes.
Absolutely.
Okay, because often those, that global approval system seems at odds with dig once, for example.
Sometimes. It's very nuanced, and we would encourage a large piece. Usually the pieces done under global are not long in duration and or particularly invasive. They're those cyclical things where they roll in, replace a manhole cover, move out again. So I take your point, but it depends on specific circumstances. Happy to take any specifics that you would like offline.
Yeah, I don't have any specifics. I'm just interested in continuing this conversation, but probably not now. So following up then, you've given us a lot of great information about proactive work that you're doing in this space. What is the resourcing like for enforcement? Because that's the other piece of this, right? Is when contractors aren't doing either our people or there's utility providers where they aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing or what they've agreed to do, how are we able to enforce that?
So we have 6 people for the entire region. However, we're looking at that in a smarter way. So we respond to customer requests for urgent attendance at sites that customers deem to be particularly disruptive or dangerous. But that initiative where we're actually looking, using the ATOC at the network using our cameras is actually proving really fruitful, because it means you can look fast without having to drive there in a carbon emitting vehicle, or sorry, ours are electric now, aren't they? But you take my point. So yes, we have a small audit team, but we're looking at using technology more efficiently to identify issues, and we can actually carry out a fully digital audit now.
So in that cost recovery space that you're looking at, is that something where potentially we might be looking at cost recovery, setting it at a level where we could increase the enforcement resources?
Yes, we're looking to review our fee schedule and that balance between recovering costs annually now, because the landscape and the cost landscape's changing dynamically.
Right, thank you. That's really helpful to understand. The other question I have is in the dynamic lanes. So Great North Road, and it would just be helpful if when you refer to Great North Road, you could put in brackets next to it Waterview, because Great North Road, as we all know, is a very long road. And I think some people erroneously think when we talk about the dynamic lanes that you're talking about the section that we've been talking about for the road improvements was completely, they're quite some distance apart. So that's just a plea. But interested, I thought that I heard you say that the local board was supporting the Waterview one, and my understanding is they haven't actually resolved on that yet.
It was Maiora that I referred to.
It was Maiora, okay,
yes.
cool. Yeah, because that's in the presentation. So the other question I have around that dynamic lane work is how we're communicating the impact of that on active and public transport modes. A lot of the community feedback is around, and this applies to all of those dynamic lane works, but a lot of the public concern is very localised. You sort of mentioned this before. So how are we doing the comms around the benefits for public and active modes, as opposed to people trying to get in and out of their suburb by car, which is the main concern I'm coming across?
Through the chair, councillor, yes. So there's always trade-offs, and we explain the trade-offs, which is benefits to maybe one mode or one for one user, and the benefits hopefully, well, always outweigh. If we're going to implement a project, there are the other side of what as well, where the impacts as well. We normally communicate when we go into. We're now doing going into the detailed design side. We're actually meeting with the local board right now, I think, today, to give them the feedback from the consultation. But then when we enact the project, we always publicise I think quite well and quite simply the benefits, and then the impacts also there available, especially with modelling of who's going to be impacted.
Okay, I think we've probably got a bit to run under for that particular one. And I just have one last thing, which is noting the consultation coming up on the parking and curbside management work. I guess I just want to flag up, we need some really good comms around that. Last time we put out a parking strategy, people went to the maps and went, oh, I'm losing parking on streets that actually already had broken yellow lines, already had clearways, and we had maps that showed we were going to add clearways, and it just became a big mess. So I'd like to know a bit more about what the comms is going to be around that.
So would I. So I'm sure that we'll have it just splendid, and we will come back and confirm once we're
so you can maybe
at that position, and we'll use the Transport Infrastructure Committee, if that's okay.
Yeah,
councillor, to update you as well.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Mayor Brown, could you finish us off before we go to lunch, please?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to be between you and a sandwich. First of all, it's good to see some urgency on the temporary traffic management costs, the dynamic lanes and the time of use charging. The question is what took you so long, but that's not really my main question. With regard to time of use charging, can I have an update personally in about in about a week's time, I have a meeting with the Minister, 2 hours, over what we are going to do together over this. So I will need to know exactly what all your thinking is, so I'm armed. Next thing is, the next bit, could I request that the next bit to come into urgency, now that we've got TTM, dynamic lanes and time use charging in there, could be cheaper cycleways using rumble strips and paint and narrower vehicle lanes. And then the third question is, whilst you saved, and well done for the TTM savings, thank you for that. You could have saved even more on Ponsonby Road by not doing it. Can we have a visit there and just see what poor value we got after that? That's a request as well. Okay. Thank you for that. And senators can go.
Okay, so I see the CEO's noted those requests. Thank you for that. Okay, moved by Councillor Fletcher, seconded by Councillor Walker. You want to speak to it, Councillor Darby?
Thanks. Look, I want to take this opportunity because we haven't really had the opportunity to debate the merits or otherwise of time of use charging. I think it's important that we do remind ourselves of maybe what the former councils, and it was councils plural, said about congestion charging. Now time of use charging slightly different, I know. And there was one key message that was always carried through those councils, and I think it has to be carried through this council too. And that is the question of addressing transport poverty and transport deficiencies in Auckland, where we know it occurs, and it's confirmed in the draft maps here for the integrated transport plan. It's clearly outlined where those deficiencies are. And there are significant public transport, active transport deficiencies in the south and in the west, and then there's a pocket in the north around Silverdale. And there's also some lesser deficiencies in the isthmus. Unless we recognise the need to address those deficiencies and put in place plans, real plans, to construct and deliver the transport that is not available to many tens of thousands of Aucklanders, I do not see the possibility of getting time of use charging over the line. Our citizens will have very good reason why not to buy into it. Yes, there are merits galore with time of use charging, but they come with addressing the transport poverty that we have in Auckland. Now that's been compounded by the recent government policy statement on transport, the expunging of the regional fuel tax. Suddenly that problem that was before us has got even more enormous. So we have a new challenge here. How do we reset the transport landscape in Auckland where the money has gone away, the problems remain, and we think the solutions are the same? We cannot deliver time of use charging, put that over the line, and say to Aucklanders, you've got another choice, when they don't have the choice. We've got a very fundamental problem in front of us. Problems are good to have in front of us because it gets you thinking about what the solution is. But in my eyes, I think we are going to be absolutely dishonest to Aucklanders if we were to continue to promote time of use charging without addressing equity and the transport poverty that is afflicting Aucklanders currently. And I hope we can resolve that by bringing a government to recognise the need to invest in a 21st century world-class public transport system and active transport system for Auckland. It's currently not visible. There is no government vision for that. And I would have to ask, I think our vision for that has dropped away too in recent months. I think we're going to have to reignite the vision for transport in Auckland because it has subsided. Thanks.
Okay.
I've moved it, and I note that the officers are still at the table, but I understood that we weren't going to have a long debate on this, that there was an agreement on the CEO's report.
Okay, I'll come. So, sorry, you can go back. I didn't anticipate this going into a debate. The item should be addressing the update. We don't really want to use it for a wider discussion here. So I hope the other two people that have signalled a willingness to speak abide by that rather than prolonging matters longer than they need to for this item. Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll be 30 seconds or less. It is current because these conversations are current with the government. And I just encourage us as a council and more strength to the Mayor's arm when we're looking at the draft DPS, which proposes cuts to public services, bus services, etc. It proposes hikes to prices or some combination of both. If you're looking at a time of use regime in that picture, it's just not going to work. We need to push back on those changes really hard, and I'm really glad that we've so far done that. We've got to keep doing that. Look, I'd just say that any funds raised through a congestion charging regime needs to be looked at as compensation for the communities that are paying the charge. Ring-fenced and directly invested right back into those communities so they have real transport options. And, you know, it's no secret that many of our wards have transport issues, mine being one, but there's plenty here all across the city where public transport is not total and it's not adequate at the moment. If we're talking about massive cuts to public transport in the future, we just simply cannot introduce this regime because it won't work. It won't have the public buy-in. So that's the dilemma that we have, and I'm really glad that as a council we're pushing on that. The other thing I'll just shout out about is equity concerns on things like mobility card holders. These are the things we need to be looking at, the more detailed situations, and I'm glad that's in the future. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? Okay, carried. So we will break for lunch now, folks. We're a little bit behind time, and we will resume at 1:10, please, on the dot. And I think... okay, yes, okay, yeah.